Well, this morning I went to speak at a class at UVA, a journalism class. Big capital J journalist here. And one of the kids was like, "Yeah, I listened to the pod yesterday. I didn't hear anything about Shedeur Sanders." So the people have spoken. I need to give this thing a run. Listen, it was the biggest story of the weekend in the NFL draft. Listen, I think before I get into like what I think about the slide, or if I even think it's really a slide, or if it's just the perception of a slide, like I should make this perfectly clear. Like I'm pro Shedeur Sanders. I'm pro Coach Prime. I've never been a Colorado hater. I've not been one of these people that's been like, hey, make less noise, say less, Deion. Um, you know, celebrate less, Shedeur Sanders. I'm not one of these like old school college football people. I mean, outside of the fact that I don't think kids should be able to transfer 4 times, but I love the fact that Colorado was new on the scene the last couple of years and was loud about it. Like, I'm not one of those people. And I would say this, like, as I break down the slide and what went into it and just what goes into being Shedeur Sanders, and I don't know the guy, but I would venture to guess we have more in common than we don't. Number one, like his dad, one of the best players all time, period. Deion Sanders. Grew up watching him, just an absolute legend. And my dad was a legend in the game as well. Played a long time, Hall of Famer. And I would say myself and Shedeur Sanders separated by decades. We certainly didn't overlap in any sense. I'm old enough to be his fucking dad. We went through some of the same shit, I'm pretty sure. I mean, it's different times, different contexts, different situations, but like big expectations, big shoes to fill, a lot of pressure. So, like, number one, first and foremost, I hope the kid plays well at the pro level because I'm always rooting for second generation guys because I think a lot of people aren't. Like, a lot of people, rightfully so. There's a lot easy about being a second generation guy, but there's also a lot of challenges as well. And like, you wouldn't know the challenges unless you were in it. And so I certainly empathize with guys that have to make that leap. And, listen, he's already accomplished a lot, him and his brother Shilo, just by making names for themselves. Like, how many Hall of Fame NFL players have kids that grow up to be drafted in the NFL, period, let alone go on to have long careers? I really can't think of too many. I mean, like Matthew Slater, they didn't find him at the top of the draft. He's a special teamer, but man, did he make a name for himself. Jake Matthews has played a very long time at tackle, been a very good player in the NFL, and his dad's a Hall of Famer. And, I went through the same thing. My brother went through the same thing. There's just not that many. There's a lot of second-generation NFL guys, like Nick Bosa's dad played in the NFL, but I'm pretty certain, respectfully, that journey was different than being Howie Long's son, right? Or being Deion Sanders' son. So there's a lot that goes into this thing that I just wanted to acknowledge, like, and tip my cap to the Sanders family, including Prime, for raising 2 kids that have played major college football at a high level and are going to play in the NFL. So, like, number one, get that squared. I think there's 2 truths at play here. Like, the first truth to me is probably the most important truth in the whole thing. He wasn't viewed as being that good, right? If he were viewed as being better, teams would have taken him. Okay, it's a down year for quarterbacks. Everybody knew that coming in, right? And as the draft neared, Shedeur's stock seemed to fall. Curiously, for a lot of people, like, why is there this chatter that he might not go in the top 10, top 5? He might not go in the first round. Like, there were some people that were starting to sound that alarm as the draft got closer. So in a very desperate year for quarterbacks, like to the point where relative to last year, like people would say Cam Ward, and this is up for debate because there's no way to play this out, but like probably not the 3rd quarterback picked in the draft last year. Might have had to wait a while, right? Like this year he's the 1st overall pick. There wasn't really an argument. Right? As the draft got close, he was going to be the 1st quarterback pick and probably the 1st pick overall. So it's a down year for quarterbacks, and you're not a consensus top 5 pick. You're not a consensus top 10 pick. as the draft gets close. Like, that should tell you everything you need to know, right? Because once you're not that guy, then we're talking about filling an entirely different need. We'll get back to that in a second, right? If you're telling me that this was collusion, a bunch of teams got together and said, hey, we're going to teach this kid a lesson. We're going to teach Prime a lesson. We're going to teach Coach Prime a lesson. Then they're absolutely cutting their noses off to spite their faces, which in the NFL, like as an NFL coach, as a GM, your job security is only as good as the quarterbacks on your roster, in my opinion. Yes, there are outliers, like Mike Tomlin's been doing it without a fucking quarterback since I got out of the league, basically. All right, like there are guys like that, sure. And there are people that weather the storm year to year with bridges and that sort of thing. But like really, if you want security, you got to have one of them guys, right? So if you're telling me that Shedeur Sanders is one of them guys, and if NFL coaches believe that, I think it's crazy to think that they would pass up an opportunity to get more job security out of this draft. Like you're telling me guys are like, you know what? This guy's a starting NFL quarterback, but I'm just, yeah, Roger, I'll pass up on this guy because he's cocky. Because I want to teach Deion Sanders, a college football coach, a lesson. Fuck that. If I got that memo on my desk, I'd be like, look, if I like the kid, I'm going to fucking draft him, Roger. That's just not happening. That's not realistic, okay? Talk about the team that drafted him, Cleveland. You're telling me that the Cleveland Browns, who paid a pervert a fortune in guaranteed money, a guy with like 1 billion civil cases on his head, the most unpopular thing in recent history in the NFL, they were willing to shell over all that money and make him their starting quarterback. But they wouldn't pick this kid, who's certainly good in league circles. They're just colluding because he's kind of arrogant, or he flunked the interview process, or he didn't say the right things at the combine. I'm sorry, but if you're a transformative player like that, even a quarterback, somebody's going to take a stab at you, and they're going to say, "Hey, we can work around this thing," right? The second truth at play here, in my opinion, and maybe this is the biggest one, and I think Prime's done a great job. And I certainly would never criticize Prime the father. I think he's done a tremendous job of raising those young men, because if he had not, they wouldn't be here. He's done a fantastic job. I love everything about the way he conducts himself as a coach. I've always lauded his old school approach, like his rubber meets the road, kind of like my way or the highway. You gotta be tough. You gotta be about your business, or else we're gonna ship you out of here. That whole attitude. But I think as an advisor, right? Because this isn't standard dad duty. Even if you played in the NFL at a high level, this isn't standard dad duty. You're taking on the role of an advisor, right? Like the league has changed a lot since Prime was in the league. The league has changed a lot since my dad was in the league. Like the ins and outs are tough, right? Like it's tough to put your finger on what's going on, what the pulse of the league is if you're not in the league. Even then, you know what the hardest thing in life is, honestly, for anybody? And I think if anybody could have this one thing, I think they'd be better off. And it's also one of the hardest things to get, is an accurate assessment of who you really are. Like, who are you? What is your value? What is your market value? What do people think of you? What is your reputation truly? When you're not in the room, what do people have to say about you? It's even harder around draft time when you're a player, right? And I think Prime had a blind spot. I think he's done a lot right, and I think he had a blind spot. You know, it's not just a blind spot. Like, listen, I know it's all coming from a place of trying to protect your son. But, you know, when you say, hey, he'll only play in City X or City Y or for team that I might be able to coach, or, you know, that stuff matters. And, you know, it's easy to look back at say, hey, well, you know, it's totally unfair because it didn't fuck over Eli Manning, right? It didn't fuck over John Elway. Jack Elway was like, we don't want my son to play in Baltimore. He'll go play baseball because he was a good baseball player at Stanford. Or like Eli, like, I don't want to play in San Diego. I think it was because of ownership, right? But the thing, and there were examples of this in other sports and in hockey and baseball and basketball where guys are like, I think Kobe Bryant was like, hey, we're not playing for Charlotte. And luckily the Lakers and Charlotte had worked out a trade before the draft. But the point I'm making is this, that when you try to compare it to an Eli Manning situation or a John Elway situation, I think you're discounting one very major aspect of the whole thing. And it's the most important thing in the equation, which is leverage. Like, if truth number one in this conversation is that Shedeur Sanders is not thought of as universally being a top 10 quarterback, even in a down year for quarterbacks, then leverage is out the window when it comes to, like, you can't pull a stunt like that. And if you don't think it's fair, then be better. Because we know sports are not fair. They're just not. The more talented you are, the more leverage you have. The better your contract is, the more leverage you have. There are ways that players gain leverage all the time on organizations, but draft picks having leverage over organizations, not quite yet. Not unless you're really, really, really good. And if they didn't think it was that good, you know what happened in a lot of those situations? When Jim Kelly said, hey, I don't want to play for the fucking Bills, it's too cold. He went and played in the USFL, and 2 years later, where'd he end up? Buffalo. You know? What did San Diego do? They drafted Eli Manning anyways, and then they traded him. Right? So, like, I'm pretty sure that it wasn't just about him saying he didn't want to play for certain teams. I think it was also the fact that he was a day 2 or day 3 guy saying, I don't want to play for certain teams, and that just doesn't fly. You can think it's unfair. Life ain't fair. All that expectation I spoke about, all the pressure, all the hard things about being a Hall of Famer son, the fact that when you walk in a room, a lot of people think, A, you didn't earn it. 2, they probably don't like you. 3, everything's been easy. All that shit. Whatever. The flip side of that is supposed to be genetics. Well, your genetics guarantee you a ticket. Look at Shedeur Sanders. He doesn't have Prime's genetics. Shilo Sanders doesn't have Prime's genetics. I don't really have my dad's genetics. Kyle was hogging all the motherfucking genetics. But the point is like, it's not like you just are delivered a set of athletic abilities and it's just going to be like, hey, now you're in the league. Like, it just doesn't play out that way. You have genetic advantages in that, like, you're probably athletic enough to make a run at it, but it doesn't guarantee you that you're going to be your dad, okay? The guarantee is that you grow up with opportunities, one, as it pertains to football, probably have, you have exposure and access to good training facilities, right? You hopefully don't want for anything as a kid, right? Like, I wasn't the only kid in my school who knew where the next meal was coming from and had clean clothes to go to school the next day and a nice big roof over my head. My dad got there by playing football, right? The biggest differentiating factor, I think, is having a roadmap. That's what your dad's supposed to give you. That's what my dad gave me, like his best stab at a roadmap. And when he didn't know, he made sure that I had people around me who did, a la an agent, number one. Now, I know there's a lot of players in the NFL who are like, an agent, man, they're just taxing all my hard work. Like, what the fuck did they do? How hard can this be to fill out a – and God bless the ones that do represent themselves and do it at a high level, like guys like Russell Okung, Richard Sherman, guys that I can remember, and recent draft picks who a lot of them were slotted in the top 5, so there's not really a lot for an agent to do, right? They say, I'm going to go in without an agent. And it works for some of them. Personally, I'm too dumb. I'm not cut out for that. So I'll pay the little fee for that peace of mind, that I know that I'm doing everything right, that I have an idea of what the lay of the land is, et cetera, et cetera. But it's not just limited to having an agent, not having an agent. I am legitimately surprised that Deion had a blind spot big enough to where Shedeur didn't have any idea what he was thought of in league circles as a player, right? Like, we're talking about talent. Like, hey, they like you. They're not crazy about you. You're a good, productive college player. They think you take too many sacks. They don't think you have elite tools, but they think you have a chance to be a starter, right? Like that's kind of probably what I would have told Shedeur Sanders in retrospect if I were Deion and I had access to that information. Maybe he didn't have access to it, and maybe his fatal flaw is that he didn't want to believe that was possible. But I do think it's a blind spot when Shedeur Sanders goes into this process and doesn't have a real concept of what the perception is, right? Which, again, is one of the hardest things it's one of the hardest pieces of intel to gather, whether you're a football player or not. Like you at home, do you really know how your friends feel about you? What drives them crazy about you? What's like the pet peeve? What's the book on why you're so fucking annoying sometimes? What's the book on, your worst habits, the habits that people love? Like you listening don't know the answers to those things. It's really hard to get an accurate assessment as an NFL prospect. You need help. And I would imagine of all kids, young men entering a process like that, you would think guys like myself or Shedeur would have best access to that information, especially if you're a college coach and you have scouts coming through your building all year, right? Like, so I think if he'd have had the right idea in his head of what he was thought of as, I think he would have adjusted some things in the process. Hey, listen, nobody likes the anonymous quotes, right? Like there's some internal warfare between teams where, you're trying to drive a guy's value down and that sort of thing. And in the process, it's kind of like character assassination. It can cost guys money, the whole thing. Like nobody loves a good anonymous quote. But the truth and the ugly truth is sometimes they're true, and like anonymous accounts of things can be true. And I have heard, and many people have heard, not the many people, y'all, that he fucking flunked the combine process. He flunked the pre-draft process. He got up in front of the whiteboard and projected, incompetence to a degree, or entitlement to a degree. Like any number of adjectives, I've heard them, and it sounded to me like, and listen, it's not a big leap to believe it, because some of the times he was on record at the podium, he sounded that way. He sounded like a guy who thought he was going top 5, regardless. And even if he was, you shouldn't go about it that way. That's just my personal opinion. I was a consensus top 5 pick in a down draft year. Go look at the top 10 in my draft. Not so bad, was I? Listen, they literally, they had me slotted. I knew I was going top 5. But and this isn't to say like, oh, look how I did it and Shedeur should have done it this way. I just think I was doing it the right way. Is you want to project willingness at every turn. Willingness to work, willingness to get better, an open mind. You want to go to the combine if you can. I didn't skip the combine. If you're not sure if you're a first day guy, maybe it's the Senior Bowl, right? But there are a bunch of turns in the pre-draft process that I think he would have handled it differently if he had an accurate assessment of who the league thought he was. And to me, that's the biggest tragedy in this whole thing is, and the story's not over, right? Like, this isn't a death sentence. Look around the league. A lot of starting quarterbacks were not picked in the first round. A lot of very relevant quarterbacks were not picked in the first round. Famously, everybody knows the best one ever to this point slid all the way to what, the 7th round? 6th round. And Patrick Mahomes, who's this generation's GOAT, was overlooked by a number of teams. They picked Mitchell Trubisky before him. So, like, listen, I know and you know every year there are success stories of guys that were undrafted, that were slept on. I know that because I have social media, and it's every undrafted guy's favorite time of the year to post that he was undrafted and everybody overlooked him, and it's an opportunity to stick it to all the evaluators and all the players that were drafted before them. Like that's an annual post. Set it and forget it for a lot of the league. A lot of the best players I played with, a lot of the best players I grew up watching, undrafted, overlooked. So he's not going to be the first if he turns out to be good, right? The story's not over. But to me, the blind spot really drives it home because I think when it comes to the slide, I'm not sold on calling it a slide in the first round. I'm not sold on calling it a slide in the second round. I think the slide kind of starts for me around the third round, and I think there's like 3 echelons with quarterbacks, right? Or maybe 4, and I didn't do this for a living, but I'll tell you this. You're either like future of the franchise, right? Like that's a Cam Ward. We're taking a big swing at this thing, right? There's also like we're taking a flyer on this guy, which I kind of take like, you know, it's a desperate team like the Giants trading up to go get Jackson Dart in a down year for quarterbacks because, quite frankly, you don't have that kind of time. Like it's a flyer, but you're hoping to find the future of your franchise. And then there's like lotto tickets and developmental guys and camp bodies. And I think probably once you get out of that first day, like, hey, we're trying to make this guy the future of our franchise, or we're taking a flyer on this guy where we know chances are he might not be the guy, but like let's take a shot at this thing. Once you're out of that echelon of player, like then I think your character really starts mattering. Like what you say, how you act starts mattering. They don't want to bring backups into a building that seem to have, and I hate the word baggage because it's so overused, but just some extra with them. Like you have to understand, pro football is full of old school people. You know, it's not always, hey, we're all colluding against the young flashy kid. A lot of times it's just that, like, to a man, they don't want to deal with the young flashy kid. There's no inner dialogue needed. There's no communication between teams needed. Like, hey, if this kid's not a consensus top 10, top 15 guy, if this guy's not a future of the franchise guy, or like let's take a flyer on this guy, then he's probably a developmental guy or a depth guy. And in that case, we don't want to, we want seen, not heard. Like, and whether you like that way of doing things or not, or if you don't think it's very progressive to do things that way, or like maybe athletes should all have a voice, like, yeah, that's what social media is for. But when you put something out on social media or when you use your voice, you will then be evaluated on what you are saying. When you stand at the podium, you will be evaluated on what you're saying. When you throw your offensive line under the bus, you will be evaluated on what you're saying. When you do a combine interview, you will absolutely be evaluated on what's said in there and how you project, especially as that guy that doesn't have otherworldly tools. It's one of the reasons I respect Shedeur Sanders. He's not some otherworldly talented guy. He's like a scrappy point guard, man. He really is. You know, like the book on him is he takes too many sacks, but he's tough. You know, he's gonna find the open man. He's gonna spread the ball around. Like he sounds to me like a guy that could start in the NFL, but he's not like one of those like real toolsy guys that you're like, holy shit. You know who those guys are? Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams. That you're just like your jaw drops, right? When you watch them play, like some of the throws they make. Justin Herbert. Those are guys where it's like the fucking tools on this guy. Fair or unfair. That's the way the world works, man. You either have the tools that make people like look past all your deficiencies, or you don't. And then it's easier to look at the deficiencies and say, well, you know, this kid's kind of arrogant. Or, you know, like, wow, he was terrible at the combine, at the board, like, so, and he doesn't have an elite arm, and he's, you know. And so I think the most important thing, if you're a college player, to take away from like a situation like this is a saying that I grew up hearing. How you do one thing is how you do everything. And I think a lot of teams subscribe to that thought process where it's like, well, if he was terrible at the board and he's just like, he's coming across this way, then I'm kind of projecting that behavior onto a backup quarterback, and I just don't love it. Like, why would I risk fucking up my quarterback room potentially, or getting leaned on by a very powerful college coach by taking a flyer on a guy who I don't think's a day one starter? Like, there's other non-day one starters. There's Dylan Gabriel, you know? And so, right, we're talking about collusion. We're talking about, like, yada, yada, yada. I heard Stephen A. Smith on TV already trying to contextualize any struggles he's going to have as part of the collusion timeline. I think it was Tannenbaum on TV, and he was like, I think he's going to be a day one starter in Cleveland. And it was like Stephen A was upset he said that because that would rain on the parade of conspiracy theorists. Like he goes, I don't think he's going to be the day one starter. I think they're going to continue to try to teach him a lesson. Like as if you had a starter in your building, like you try to teach him a lesson instead of trying to trot the best guy out there and win games. If he's the best quarterback in the room, the only reason he doesn't play week one is because they're gonna take care of him and roll him out on a timeline, right? Like there's already people trying to say, hey, when he fails, this is why, and it calls into question the motivation that you have as a talking head when it comes to talking about this kid. Like, are you pushing a conspiracy, or are you like, let it play out? And so for me, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to let it play out. I'm a fan of the kid, the player, right? I think he's probably learned a lot of hard lessons the last month. I don't think the league's teaching him those lessons. I think the world's just teaching him those lessons, right? And I think ultimately he can be a starting quarterback in the league. And if he is a starting quarterback in the league, that doesn't throw gas on the fire of the conspiracy that the league got together in some fucking circle jerk and we're like, yeah, we're going to stick it to Prime. Like, so that we don't have a starting quarterback. You know, like that just sounds stupid to me. I think the media might have done this, guys. Like we've talked briefly about this. Like, I don't think there's any conspiracy in the NFL, but I could see a conspiracy that I believe in the media at large, because the one thing I said when we came out of this first round the other night was what a boring draft this is. We had 2 trades. One of them was only a big deal because it wasn't for Shedeur Sanders. New York trading up to get Jackson Dart. Like everybody was, half the reaction was like, it wasn't Shedeur. So to me, the first round was slow. Everybody was talking about this draft coming up like it was a starter draft, solid starter.
4 trades. You're thinking of those 2, Pierce,
yeah,
and then like the Eagles one technically.
Oh yeah.
Like,
well, who cares? It was boring.
Right. Yeah.
It was just a boring first round. Like most people watching would say, yeah, that was boring. And most evaluators would tell you this year, like, hey, like this is a solid starter draft. There's less guys like Travis Hunter, right? Where you're like, man, that guy could be really special, high ceiling. Less guys like Abdul Carter, right? So as a media conglomerate, like there is some credence to thinking, let's drive this guy up the draft board so the public gets all incensed when he slides out of the first round. And I think ultimately what happened here is the public just they jumped out of the gym for this guy. And then when the league disagreed, they were indignant. There is a part of the population that is indignant about this because they felt like they were right and they weren't right. And maybe they are right in how good the player is. But as we know, watching the NFL draft year after year, the league doesn't bat 1,000. And neither do you. So if you're right on this one, that's just the way the cookie crumbles. I don't think it's some big orchestrated, colluding effort by the NFL. And I don't think it's rocket science to say, hey, man, like, listen, Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year, very impressive production. You know who else was Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year? Max Duggan. Actually led his team to the playoffs. Threw for almost 4,000 yards, rushed for almost 500 his senior year. Not a pro, right? Didn't get drafted, undrafted. Like, nobody notices.
7th round, but yeah.
7th round, okay? This happens all the time. Very good, very productive college players do not get picked in line with their production because the NFL is about tools and trades. And if they don't think he has them, you know who had great production? I saw this week. Everybody's talking about, I have never seen a player do X and enjoy this fate. Gardner Minshew did X. Somebody on Twitter pointed that out. They were like, production-wise, this is literally what Gardner Minshew did. And then you say, oh, well, that was the Pac-12. Well, this is the Big 12. This is the Big 12. You know that first Colorado team that like went 3-0 or whatever they did and everybody freaked out about it? That was a Colorado team full of Jackson State transfers. That was basically Jackson State. So, like, that speaks to the Big 12 for you. I mean, like, listen, the bottom line is Daniel Jeremiah last week on this show, when I asked him, plain and simple, he's one of the most honest people in the NFL. If there were a collusion scandal that broke out and Daniel Jeremiah was part of it, I will eat my hat. This hat costed way too much. I just got this sick Grateful Dead hat. Way overpriced. I don't even want to say how much it costs. I will eat this hat. Daniel Jeremiah is an honest man. I asked him who Shedeur Sanders' pro comp was. He said, Teddy Bridgewater. And this goes to show you. He's talking about an NFL starter who's a bridge and a starter, universally respected, loved by his teammates and fans alike, played 10-plus years in the NFL. I saw comments under the post that were incensed that we would possibly compare Shedeur Sanders to Teddy Bridgewater, who played a decade in the league, was bottom of the first-round guy. And you know what people say about Teddy Bridgewater? He's like a perfect human being. He's like a mensch. Okay? He didn't have otherworldly talent. Neither does Shedeur Sanders. Maybe Shedeur Sanders would have been a second-round pick if he had an accurate assessment of who people thought he was, because then he would have acted like a second-round pick. If you're going to act like a top-5 player, you better for sure be a top-5 player. And I think what happened in this situation is he had bad intel. And it's shocking to me. But it is not the end of the story, and I look forward to watching Shedeur Sanders resurrect the Browns. I hope that would be the craziest development ever. Like, you just can't make shit up in the NFL. It's the storylines are crazy. This would make a lot of sense. So I'm hopeful for him. I root for all second-generation dudes. He's just, at the end of the day, a young guy. You know, like, half the things I would have said and done at 22, 23 years old, I never in my entire life I'd do them now. Like, there are things that I said when I was 21 years old that make me cringe. There are ways that I conducted myself at 21 years old that make me cringe. You know, like, I wish I could sit down and talk to that guy and be like, hey, cut that bullshit out, or like whatever. He's got a lot of time left to adjust course, and he's going to grow up just like I did in the NFL, just like every player does. The NFL forces you to grow up, or it forces you to break. And I think with his background, he's going to grow up. He's not going to break. He's a tough kid. His dad's a tough ass dude. They'll get through this. But I just don't appreciate the people that whenever something doesn't go their way, they just scream conspiracy. Like, that to me is just, it's too easy. It just means you got a take wrong. Your take was that he was a top 5 quarterback. It didn't play out that way. And because you thought that, then you deserve like a settlement or something. Mel Kiper's head almost exploded on TV. Like the guy in the front row when Dave Chappelle was being a white supremacist. That's what I thought was going to happen to Mel Kiper's head. And you know, like, it's easy to get married to a take, but in my opinion, the facts are the facts. Like, nothing. Occam's razor, guys. You know what that is? Usually it's the most obvious shit. It's not whatever you're making it out to be. And in this case, like, if the NFL's wrong, I think they're wrong honest. And if they're wrong, it didn't help that this guy conducted himself the way he conducted himself, allegedly, in interviews. And I'll close with this. And I sincerely, I mean, like, there's no reason that Deion Sanders would ever hear this, but, like, I have the utmost respect for Deion Sanders. I think part of why the media went the way it went is, like, this is somebody's son. You know, the guy was just working for Barstool. Now he's coaching at Colorado. He's got a Twitter account. He's very he's able to clap back. He's 10 times, 15, 20 times the football player I ever was. So, like, I don't want to be on his bad side. And this isn't me being like Dan Orlovsky where I say I don't want to criticize any players that were better than me. By the way, that part is something I think about all the time. I just have to put on my big boy pants and do it. But I appreciate the share from Dan Orlovsky. People fucking jumped all over him because they think of him as a soft target. I think Dan's great. But this isn't like that. This is just me saying I don't want to be interpreted as taking a pot shot at somebody's kid before the draft. Especially like if I watched a lot of his tape and I didn't think he was that good, I might just skip over the topic. I might just be like, well, I'm not going to bury somebody's son, right? Like an NFL player's son, especially one that probably could just get on the microphone and clown the fuck out of me the same day, this tiny little podcast. Like, I think that's totally natural for people to say, hey, you know what? If everybody's saying this kid's good, I think I'll sit out being the one that says, I think he's day 2, day 3 prospect. So what you have is an echo chamber. Like what you have with most takes on the internet and most sports topics. Like, it's an echo chamber. It's kind of like, hey, Luka looks out of shape right now, doesn't he? But who the fuck's going to say that and say, hey, Dallas should have traded him? Like, if anybody really believes that, they're going to wait until the mushroom cloud clears. Like, by at least 5-10 years, and Luka never wins a championship. Then somebody's going to come out and say, I think it was the right move. It's the same thing with, like, leading up to a draft when everybody says, this player's the greatest thing since sliced bread. It takes courage to get on a limb and be like, yeah, I actually think the kid sucks. And in this situation, that wouldn't even been what I was saying or what somebody who was a detractor would say. They'd just be like, I don't think he's that good. And so, yeah, like the Deion Sanders thing matters. And I think it reflects in like how much criticism Shedeur Sanders got in the media. You know, I think he's going to get criticism from certain people who don't give a fuck. But like people like me who, like, I'm visible. I'm like, I was literally in Shedeur Sanders' shoes. Like, I'm going to sit this one out, you know, like until now. When I can be like, see, I told you. It's just safer. It doesn't make a shit for me to do a Shedeur Sanders isn't doing or saying the right thing segment 2 weeks before the draft. I'm not a draft analyst. I don't feel like it's my job. And the possibility there is that Deion Sanders is gonna make me feel like an ant. So I'll just pass up the opportunity. Now though, where it's like, it's a lot easier to do this segment, right? And so, like, again, I'm rooting for the kid. This isn't a hit job on the kid, but I don't think he handled things correctly, and I don't think he had all the right information.